Hello and welcome to Homeland Security Today's special edition in honor of World Refugee Day. My name is Christina Tanaschuk. I'm the executive editor of Homeland Security Today. We're really honored to feature a number of organizations and people and ways we can all help the refugees around the globe. As many have been reading, the refugee crisis around the world has really reached epic proportions, with millions of people displaced from their homes by the Russians invading Ukraine, to Syrian refugees still out there and still needing support. All around the globe, we're seeing organizations and people stepping up and helping. So with that, I'm very excited to shine a light on Lantern Rescue, which is an organization that works on human trafficking. And as many know, that in refugee situations, you have many predators who prey on this vulnerable population because they are desperate and they are in need. So while we were in Poland, Homeland Security Today was bringing materials and tourniquets and water filters to Ukraine, and we had the pleasure of seeing Lantern Rescue in action. So we're very pleased today to welcome Whitney Miller, who's the Director of Public Engagement for Lantern Rescue. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Of course, it's good to see you, and it's particularly good to see you on the ground at the front lines, really helping refugees and others. So with that, I want to just have you share with us, like, why Lantern Rescue was founded and a bit about your mission.
Absolutely. I'll tell you really what began our organization was we noticed that there were a lot of organizations in this field, but very few lived up to what they said they were doing. Right. And so because of that, when our two founders came together, one being a former Marine in signal intelligence and linguist, and then the other being very familiar with foreign governments, when they kind of came together and had the same heart and passion for seeing these things move forward in the right direction, they were able to do the things that these other organizations weren't. And a lot of that looks like bridging those, U.S. agencies and other foreign governments to make sustainable programs that are going to last in these countries and not just swoop in, save the day for a day, and then head out. So we are really aiming to make those sustainable programs worthwhile and work in other countries.
Excellent. That's excellent. So when you say that, do you ordinarily work with refugee populations, or is it just vulnerable populations in general?
So I would say it's vulnerable populations in general. The refugee portion is not commonly what we work with. I will say Ukraine it opened up a lot of things because of the situation there and the movement of people. And because refugees tend to be vulnerable people, on that end of it, we really ended up working with a lot more of the refugee population.
So what ordinarily makes a population vulnerable to trafficking?
Well, that's a very open-ended question because there's a lot of things, right? Some of the things we see most commonly are, the infrastructure failing in different countries. War obviously brings out those vulnerable people. Different conflicts within nations. Ideology. That's another one. We've witnessed a lot. Certain ideologies. So if the idea that it's okay to marry a 6-year-old comes up as the ideology, we see a vulnerable population, right? Poverty, obviously, is another one. If we were to talk about within the states, it would definitely be money and perversion as the driving force. Outside of the US, it tends to be poverty and oppression.
It seems like you have a lot of experiencing learning that. So what are some of the challenges in working with these populations? I'm sure that you could go on for a day, but
Yeah, sometimes in the challenges, again, depending on where we're at, really vary. Corruption in other countries, foreign countries, is definitely something that we find as an adversity. So really vetting out the networks of people that we're working with. That tends to be really important for what we're doing and making sure that what we're doing continues in that sustainability model, right? So the other part is, the policies and procedures are not like we experience here, whether it be judicial or otherwise. So things like teaching countries how to develop a case, little things like that that you wouldn't typically consider here because we've got it together a little more, right? But in some of the other countries, it just varies. So that makes our job a little bit more difficult because we never want to necessarily step on the way things are being done, but there are some changes that have to happen in order to ensure the bad guys are being brought to justice. So well,
Sorry, you cut out there for just a
oh yeah,
second.
no
So
problem.
that last part of what you said was cut off.
Yep. So I was just saying, obtaining prosecution in a lot of other countries can be very difficult, and their means of prosecution. So we're
Okay.
working to help, guide in that regard in some of these other countries when it comes to the human trafficking situation.
So you're not only helping human trafficking, but you're kind of revising legal systems to support.
Well, yes, partnering with
Yes.
the
Yeah.
kind of see
ab-
where there are some changes that could occur to facilitate, prosecution being followed through with. So
Absolutely. So when you're talking with refugees or on the ground, are there things that the refugee aid workers should be on the lookout, or refugees themselves? What should they be on the lookout for, and how do you educate both the refugee workers and the refugees themselves about like what to be cautious of?
right. Well, and I'll tell you, I'll kind of defer back to what we're doing in Ukraine. Our group here at Lantern was able to put some material together very quickly to get to people that were at the border, to get to people that were within the country, and it gives those numbers to call for aid and help, right? Or if you find yourself in a difficult situation, because if you were to go from Ukraine to Poland, you don't have the resources. You don't know who to call, who is trustworthy, who is not, So we really kind of focused in on giving them something to put in their hand. Because as you can imagine, as a refugee being displaced in a situation like we see in Ukraine, it's a mom and her child, right? And so she's doing everything she can to just make it, without the security of a husband or father or so on. So you do have that vulnerable population, and so making sure we have something that they can look back at and say, okay, what do we do here? The other thing we've found very important, especially with the Ukraine situation, is operating within the country, not just on the borders, because we got to get it to them before they get to the border. The bad guy's already waiting, right? And so we need to be a step ahead of that situation. So establishing those connections inside the country before people head out of it, so that they don't fall vulnerable as they're moving throughout the country. Things to look for or things not to do, and we included this on that paper that we handed them. But never leave your children, right? So that sounds silly, but all it takes is someone to come up and say, "Hi, we just want to check them out, make sure there's no medical issues." And all of a sudden, your child's in a tent and you're not there, and you don't process it. So all of these things that would seem, like normal comprehension typically in the moment like that, it's not. It's just not there. And so making sure you don't leave your children. Don't give any of your documents away to people. They don't need to see your passports. They don't need to see your, any kind of identification unless they are trusted government officials or people that have been designated specifically that you have heard about. The one offs holding the sign that says, I'll help you get where you need to go. Watching out for those people. Using public transportation is a great way to avoid that. Things that are common. And there's so many little intricate things and so many situations that we can't necessarily account for, but preparing people before they leave the country. We've established 4 warehouses within the Ukraine, and a lot of that is to be able to work with the people specifically in those areas to make sure they are getting the message out to the people that are moving and leaving Ukraine. So, and the same is true for other countries as well that we've operated in, just giving them the resources that they would not typically have to ensure that before they even make that transition and become refugees by crossing the border, they have what they need.
Excellent. And we're happy to put those on HS Today's website and offer, like, if you have posters or anything that people could download and put up, we're happy to host those on the site so that people can come and get them and put them up in the refugee centers as well. In Poland, we did not see any signage regarding human trafficking or some of those messages. So we'd love to share that. And when I go again, I'm happy to put them in all the refugee centers so that they can learn that. But I think it's an excellent point that the predators do take advantage of, acting as if they are officials and saying, I want to check out your child, or, it's kind of the same situation as when someone comes to your child and says, help me find my dog. You're not thinking that that's a bad person. And unfortunately, this is when some of that evil really thrives. So that's terrific that you're doing that. And so you do have linguists and other people on staff that are able to translate these things into Ukrainian, or how are you handling the language barriers?
So we do, and I'll be honest with you, the staffing we have in Ukraine are Ukrainians.
Oh,
They are greatest assets, because they know the barriers, they know the cultural differences. So we have really built out a great network there that are fighting for their people. And when you fight for your own people, it's different. And there's a different element of trust and respect in that regard. So vetting the people that we have established, and knowing that they are a good group of people, a good core group to really bring this message to the ones that need to hear it has made all the difference. But yes, when it comes to translating, that is something that has been translated into Ukrainian and Polish. So
excellent. I'm so happy to hear that. And I completely understand. Given I'm 100% Ukrainian, I understand that fighting for your own people definitely, it plays a role in your passion and your commitments overall. So, are you seeing any trends in Ukraine or with the refugee situation that you'd want to bring to people's attention, or particularly really to law enforcement's attention?
yeah, it's hard to take into account the trends per se because they vary so quickly, right? When one bad guy gets caught doing something, others catch on really quick. I will say, and in the refugee and human trafficking arena as a whole, we are definitely seeing the movement of victims being further distances. So instead of someone just being taken, from Ukraine to Poland, and then being, taken advantage of there, or in those bordering country situations, we're seeing a long, extended transportation of victims. And that's concerning because, the further out they get, the harder it is to keep a grasp on it, right? And so, to be honest, we are dealing with a case currently where we are investigating a Ukrainian girl within the DR. So that's some serious movement quickly. And so when we talk about trending, unfortunately it is things like that are trending, not just in this situation but overall. So something to be watching for. And again, that comes into play with the counter human trafficking, and then as much material being put out in advance of that so people are warned. If we can stop it before it happens, it's great. But so often we don't find ourselves in that situation.
Well, or if you did stop it before it happened, you'd never know.
Yeah, you're right,
So
you're
there's
right.
that. I mean, this is again in Homeland Security and human trafficking, in all the ways of protecting people. When someone isn't kidnapped, you don't get any praise. Like, there's no way to know that you made that difference. So that's a great segue into, like, what would you say is the most common need to prevent trafficking? I mean, I'm hearing from you that it's really education and pre-positioning thought to be a little bit more suspicious than you might be in a crisis. But what would you say is best prevention?
The greatest way to prevent it, and we can talk at a bunch of different levels, right? We can talk at the government level, we can talk about the individual level, but creating organizations that are fighting together, that's huge. If we could all come together, this isn't a competition, right? Fighting human trafficking is not a competition. So bring these organizations together to actually come to the forefront, it's huge. Building relationships with, officers, with HSI, with, just the plethora of intelligence that's out there to make a difference and start organizing it to be used in ways that are beneficial to the people that are victims. That's a great start at a big level, right? At the individual level, and within your own communities, I think it looks like getting that awareness out, getting information out, watching for cues. When you have someone that is looks uncomfortable and someone is speaking for them all the time, there's little cues you can pick up on, but we're just not as accustomed to that, to looking for those things, but they're there. So learning how to pick up on those cues is big. And then if we're talking about within your own home, parents might make sure you're monitoring what your children are doing. I mean, that is huge. We see, if we're talking trends in human trafficking alone, the increase of CSAM is unreal. So having that child,
What is PSAM, please?
sex abuse material. So the growth, the trend of that it's sickening to see just how much that is being exploited. By someone picking up a refugee, right, or bringing them on a bus or taking your child to do something else. It is, and those are things you never get back. So when we talk about trends and how to prevent them, the number one prevention starts within your own home, monitoring what your children are doing and educating them about the good guys and the bad guys.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And it's sad because the internet is a great place, but it can also be just such a purveyor of evil all across and spreading information that shouldn't be spread. But how would someone get involved with you or involved with human trafficking for refugees or in the US?
For us, it's a little bit difficult. We have a lot of people that ask, how can we volunteer? How can we make a difference? And man, we love that the heart is there for that. We really do. The way we work, it's a little bit more difficult because we do work more with, foreign police or agency people who have been involved in investigations and know that realm and network. If we're talking about, the common Joe, right, that wants to step in and help, it's going to be things like, this is not what everybody wants to hear, but it's going to be things like stepping up monetarily, right? Making those investments in organizations that are trustworthy, and doing your homework to make sure they are, because that's a big part of it. And then bringing that education piece to their home. So when we talk about volunteering, for us, it's a little bit difficult. If you're volunteering for an organization, make sure it's a reputable one and you've dug deeper than the first page of Google.
Absolutely. Well, and there are charity pages that kind of rank charities, and there are ways to do that research. So that's great advice. But I think, sadly, it is a financial issue, and the money does help. Like, you travel all around Austin to be on the front lines of Ukraine, all of that. So we do encourage you to support the organizations that you believe in on a regular basis, because these needs are not going away. So listen, Whitney, this has been fantastic, and we're super glad to have the partnership with Lantern Rescue. We do have an interview online right now with Austin Shamblin. We did that interview in Poland, so if you're interested in learning more about Lantern Rescue's work and why they were literally there in the first days of the invasion. So please take a look at that, and you will be seeing more from this partnership. We have agreed to have a special section of our human trafficking page at HSToday devoted to Lantern Rescue's work. And this will allow them to post videos and post information about what they're doing around the world to help human trafficking. So as you know, Homeland Security Today is trying to secure tomorrow by heralding and giving you opportunities to see great work and to see great experts and people all around the world trying to keep it safer. So Whitney, thank you to you and all of your team, and certainly to your founders for all the help. Sorry about the noise, but for all the help that they provide refugees and vulnerable populations around the globe. And thank you for your work.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you for partnering with us and being such an advocate for change.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.